strategic plan was passed at our May 26th meeting unanimously, thankfully. That has been a labor of love for Abby and I over the past year, and I'm very thankful to get started, getting to work. So how we have organized it, and as you may remember from the Ag one pager, we have certain milestones everyone's working towards. And so now, thankfully, we can get out of the planning stage and start kind of executing on the work of the Agriculture Committee, and obviously all of the committees and the work of the board as a whole. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about that moving forward. One relevant piece to the work that we're doing, just as an aside, this is no action needed, is Abby and I, through the budget, received, not Abby and I personally, the workforce board received $200,000 to contract with someone to develop the New American Relocation Network, to essentially actually coordinate all of the different individuals and businesses and organizations that are bringing new Americans into the state, whether it's refugees, asylees, through immigration, and also through visas. What we're the small scope that they'll have through visas, which obviously relates to this work, is creating kind of like a inventory of all the different resources for businesses and individuals if they're trying to get a visa to come to Vermont and work here, or hire foreign labor for both ag related jobs, farm jobs, and non-farm jobs. So that will be helpful because we have a milestone much later on about kind of getting that accessible to lots of different farms, lots of different businesses. And so they'll be doing a lot of that work for us. So we'll be giving, we haven't contracted with anyone. We have written that in the RFP. We're hoping the RFP will be released at the beginning of the fiscal year, so July 2nd. But that will give you periodic updates whenever we have a contractor on how that work is going. So you can kind of stay up to date, but that takes a little bit of the workload off Abby and I, which is very nice. So we're very thankful for that. So for today's meeting, Abby, do you want to just quickly run through what the agenda is, and then we'll get right into the meat of the meeting? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Roy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious, where did that $200,000 come from? Did it come from the state legislature? Exactly where?
Yeah, so the governor proposed it in our budget. We gave $1 million increase to the Office of Refugee Resettlement for the purpose of essentially when this is obviously a little bit out of the scope of this specific thing, but when refugees come to Vermont, there's only so much they're allowed to do with federal funds. They're super restricted so that they're obviously not misused. So we gave about $1 million to the Office of Refugee Resettlement to give some of this like flexible funding so that they could contract out to organizations like BDCC, who does like helping them get their driver's license, or like connecting them with housing, or any of that kind of like concierge service to help like make the process better for someone coming here. And the governor thought, why don't we, this is a great kind of like filling the gap, but why don't we take a step back and actually kind of like build out the system for like immigrants who want to move here, and foreign labor, and anyone who's, so that we have like this network of services, so we kind of know where they are, and it's not just happening like case by case. It's actually something that like someone can come into the system and there's established processes on how to do that. And so the $200,000 is a line item in the governor's budget approved by the legislature that goes to the workforce board by way of Department of Labor, because our budget items through Department of Labor, to contract to have someone essentially map out this work and then provide recommendations on how we could better coordinate the system moving forward, where further investment is needed. Because we anticipate there will obviously be further investment needed in making this better, but just getting like right now, no one even kind of understands where all the different moving pieces and parts are. So that's kind of the step one. Okay. And so that's where the money came from.
All right. And so will this be just a one-shot $200,000, or will this be an annual sum of $200,000?
It's $200,000 over 2 years for a contractor. Based on the recommendations, there may be budget asks in the next fiscal, to whatever the 2 years from now fiscal year is.
Thanks.
Yeah. course. So we'll keep you updated on that. We are hoping that the $200,000 is it probably will be like a consultant or someone, like one person really kind of like driving this. It probably won't be like a company doing this unless they, but we're hoping the $200,000 is enticing enough for over 2 years for someone. I think it will be. It's an RFP, so we put it out competitively to bid, but we definitely have folks that will flag it for that I think would be, there's definitely a lot of interest in this space. We've already received some outreach. So I'm very excited about it because it's also something like the workforce board itself can concretely do. So, but it's technically a line item through Department of Labor. So I'll keep you updated as that goes on. All right. Abby? Run through the agenda.
So as Tori mentioned, with our newly approved strategic plan, we're going to start addressing some of those action items that you all had worked through the process of us tackling as a committee. So today we're going to discuss the inventory of Vermont agriculture employers. So figuring out a way to tackle creating some sort of inventory of Vermont employers that are looking to proactively engage with students, potential employees. And then we're going to start initial conversations on the employer toolkit that we're going to have for employees and employers in the agriculture sector. So those are the two items that we're going to address today to just get rolling on our portion of the strategic plan. And then if anyone has any closing thoughts or anything like that, we'll go from there.
Yeah. So today we'll go through with those. We have 2 milestones we'll go over, and we'll have some specific discussion points for information that we'll need from you. And then we'll obviously talk about kind of next steps and how to translate that into action. Does anyone, sorry, Abby, I just literally bulldozed over you. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Hey, Abby, you want to share your screen? Great. So the overall, as you all remember from the one pager, obviously we can recirculate what the final one pager was, but our top line goals were outreach plan connecting Vermont employers with students. There was a big focus on getting employers involved in connecting with students at a young age, providing informational resources for employers, Vermont farms and agriculture related businesses with, things like an employer toolkit, CDL information, et cetera. And then our final one, but which we're not tackling today, obviously, is hosting events to engage with students at any age. So the way that Abby and I have organized our strategic plan in terms of our actual work is we've made like a monthly Excel sheet of when things are due. And that kind of like plans out our workload. So the first 2 milestones that we're focusing on with this group and we're discussing today is by December 2023, the Agriculture Committee will develop an inventory of Vermont employers looking to engage with agricultural focused students. This milestone is getting at ultimately having an inventory of employers, a kind of living inventory of employers who are interested in these opportunities, either like a email list or some way to get them to invite them to all these different events. And then we'll have an inventory of kind of the student side of the younger student side, and we'll bring those together. But this is just step 1 in that process. So that's kind of what we're going to discuss today, is getting there. And then by January of 2024, the Agriculture Committee will develop an employer toolkit focused on hiring foreign labor. So we will obviously not be developing that toolkit today, but we'll have discussion points about formulating how that works. Any questions there before we move to kind of discussion point 1? Great. Abby, next slide. So again, inventory of employers, reread on the milestone there. So I guess the first discussion point for folks here, as has anyone ever made or used an inventory? Are there any ones in particular that you feel like have worked well in other spaces? If there's things that you would like us to model something like this on, or any ideas about kind of where this could best live or how it could look?
Tori, is it possible just to ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, once this inventory is created, is the thought that it will be passed on to, for example, career offices at the different colleges and universities so that they know they can reach out to these employers as a way to facilitate internships or something similar? Is that kind of the intention?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be that we would, use it as a way, as an easy way to get a bunch of employers who have interest in kind of some of these student-focused events or hiring engaged quickly. So it could either be through email or obviously if, they would have to say they're okay with us passing along their information to a career person or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of what we're looking for, is like a living thing for them so we can consistently be in contact with them.
Thank you. That's helpful. I guess, at least in terms of my experience in doing these types of processes, is that they so quickly become out of date that there needs to be some sort of plan in place in terms of how frequently things are being updated and by what's the strategy for keeping the information current. I think, like, before creating the list, given that there's oftentimes changes in websites or the primary point of contact, having a plan in place connected to how it's updated and the frequency of that process is always really just like a helpful, just a step to have outlined beforehand.
Yes. I believe we have in the plan, I think, a yearly assessment of it, re-updating it, which probably we could end up doing more quickly afterwards, but probably after the first year. So I think that hopefully we'll keep it alive, but that's the initial process that we have. But since moving on into question 2, I guess, just a brainstorm of who should be kind of like our initial, if we're starting to make this inventory, I guess, of different farms. And obviously we're not going to be perfect. There will be people that get missed. We'll include them when they want to be, if they hear, et cetera. But what are kind of some of the big points of contact that we should be looking to start making these connections, talking to a bunch of different organizations? It's not just farms, obviously, like, other businesses in the food kind of industry and ag industry. What are the kind of the big organizations or, regional entities or state entities that we should be contacting with to kind of start this work? And just a brainstorm for Abby and I as we're developing this.
So I think I've raised this before, but have we actually defined what an agriculture business is? We're a dairy cooperative. We have farmer owners that are part of our cooperative. So how deep does this go? And then we look at somebody like Vermont Creamery. I consider them an ag business because, well, we ship them product, so that's probably my initial thought. But how are we defining this? Because what a farm needs is very different than what Vermont Creamery needs, which is very different than what we or Agrimark need.
So we defined agriculture as the cultivation of Vermont land and livestock, and we basically determined that as like any business that either cultivates or develops products related to that. So it's very, very broad. I think with this inventory, what we're talking about is, for just like at a base level, it's just basically as many businesses as we can that are interested in engaging with students at a young age. They will get opportunities probably that might not be related to them. Like, it may get, if they're a timber organization and there's a dairy event going on, a 4-H event, and they probably won't take advantage of that. But just having kind of a list of these farms or, dairy producers or timber producers or, Vermont Creamery that are looking to connect with students, having kind of some of these points of contact so that we can make sure they're aware of what's going on in the CTE centers at the schools, events we're hosting, et cetera, so that they know kind of like where a touch point would be for some of these younger students. So it's very, very broad. But the intent here is not like kind of the perfection of it. It's really just to start to get started with as many different, individuals and businesses as possible to start connecting them with folks. Great, thanks, Kelly.
I almost wonder, Kelly, when you all were developing that career guide for food systems, obviously that's a very broad term. How did you all decide, for those of you that aren't aware, Farm to Plate has this career guide for students and identifying their career pathways to get into certain careers in Vermont's food system. And we're updating that right now with Kelly's
Good
group.
question.
How did you all like carve out the scope of what jobs would fall into that category? If that's something that, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I wish I had a little bit more of the historical context for how the different types of careers that were included were selected, and we're sort of we're reaching out to the person that was originally responsible for drafting that to get more details. So I'm not entirely sure why certain careers were selected over other ones. I know it looks at both careers that are directly involved in agriculture, more, the farming and those types of careers, as well as the ag adjacent careers, just understanding that it's not just those directly working in agriculture, but those that also support the agricultural sector in other ways. But I'll definitely check in. I know the intern that's responsible for doing that process now, she's reaching out to the person that was originally facilitating the process of creating the guide. So I will for sure share that back.
Okay.
So I think, Kirsten, to get to your point here, because it's so broad, just a level set with everyone about what we're doing here is that when we initially did when we were brainstorming for the strategic plan, everyone was like, farms want to connect with students, businesses want to connect with students. This is like, we're probably like 5 steps before these people are actually making career choices. It's like we're, that are interested in getting involved at the younger age, attending events with students, doing exploratory work with younger students, either, at many different ages. So what we're trying to get essentially is kind of just start working with groups of employers to do this. So for this question, in terms of organizations, and Kelly put some in the chat that I think are helpful, but also is just, what are some of the like are there industry organizations in the state? Like it could be, with dairy, right? It could be, are there, like, Kirsten, obviously you probably interface with a lot of different farms. Are there, as it relates to, I'm making this up, like a cheesemakers, like group, whatever, like kind of some of these bigger, even just like agency of ag, different, like a point of contact, an agency of ag who works with certain businesses, et cetera. Like just kind of some of these general, the foresters I know have like a group, like who are the kind of different groups that interface with these folks. Allie?
I apologize to the group. I'm on the road, so sorry I'm not on camera. A few things as I'm listening to this is if we're looking to get a list of farms, those that are under regulatory framework, the Agency of Ag would have contact information for if that was what we wanted as a touch point in the beginning. As my mind is wandering though, and somebody said that we need to keep this list up to date, and I forget who that was, but thank you, great point. And as somebody who had children once enrolled in work-based learning, I wonder if it's advantageous for there to be a relationship between the local or district school where that work-based learning happens. So that would be, I believe, in the high school only. And therefore, the list would be probably more accurate if they were working directly with those businesses that were within their area of education. And I'm still not certain, if we don't work with the school system, how we engage or get these students to engage with with learning that otherwise would be work-based learning at that age.
So yes, that's step like 3, but yes, essentially is like our ideal situation is that we're able to arm work-based learning coordinators with businesses that are interested in these types of things so that they can, one of the things that the work-based learning coordinators tell us all the time is we do not have the time to prospect businesses. Like we don't have the time to like go out and search. Like it's really as simple as like who comes to us is like that's
So-
what we do. So I think
So-
step 1 here is kind of like doing this, but then the information is also as useful on that actual connecting front.
Is that something that we can consider when we're building out the system that does kind of put together the relationship of those looking for work and those that need workers?
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
could those work-based learning coordinators have access to that
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
visioning? Okay, thank you.
But I think how we'll organize it, like how I'm envisioning how we're organizing it, is it will be like, well, obviously statewide, there's some statewide organizations, but regionally we'll have a look into kind of like who some of these folks are. I'm wondering, I think if this was any other committee like manufacturing or a different type, of entity where it's a little bit more specific and it's, a little bit more kind of like in the business economic development realm, are if we're thinking regionally, because again, like some of these folks know the folks in their area, the smaller entities in their area, like are the RDCs a good contact for this? Are there other like regional entities that kind of do this, like would know and interface with some of these folks that we could kind of use them as like a point of contact to update us on who's in their sphere?
Yeah, and I think adding on to that, when we think of, I think instead of approaching it as, oh, what are we categorizing in agriculture? I think we should just think of the businesses that, I think it should be anyone who relates to agriculture by their own definition that want to engage with this list. Obviously, as time goes on, if this is viewed as a valued resource, I would assume that more employers would want to engage with it. But I think right now identifying, obviously you all, but other leaders in the agriculture community that know of business owners that are actively looking to engage, those are the folks that we want to capture right now. So I think trying to identify, and whether that's the RDCs or folks that you all know, but people that are maybe at a higher level that know of business owners that want to be on something like this is probably the best way to approach it. And then assuming it'll grow organically if it's a valued resource that we keep up to date and more people will want to be on that list. But starting out, I'm assuming it's going to need to be low-hanging fruit of people that we all in our networks have good relationships with and know that they want to be on a list like this, proactively looking for employers and students.
So I think in terms of next steps here, so again, just to like reorient on our focus here, step 1 is really getting kind of a sense of employers who are interested in and want to be engaged with students. No work required for them other than being okay with us giving their contact information out to people who aren't marketers, obviously, and us being able to use them to let them know of things that are going on. Step 2 in this, again, is kind of like an outreach plan for students and hosting events for students and kind of bringing the employers to this, to some of these events as well. So I think for next steps in terms of Abby and I, what we can do, Allison, we can connect with you in terms of like, I know obviously there's lots of farms that you all have contact information from, what kind of level of outreach we want to do there in terms of getting people's like on the farm side. And then if folks have, like, I think, Kelly sent some in the chat, but some of the industry organizations that might have some of this contact information or might be a resource could send that to us. And we can start making just initial outreach to those folks about like who would be on this list or, et cetera, like kind of explaining what we're trying to do. So I think that would be kind of an appropriate next step. And then for our next committee meeting, Abby and I can kind of come with this is who we've heard from, this is what it looks like right now. And we can determine what more information needs, where we're missing folks, if there's industries we're missing from or regions we're missing, and then start just to determine kind of like next steps and cadence of updating, et cetera. Does that sound good?
So let me say this. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around how I can actually contribute to this. Because Extension does interface and interact with a lot of farms, as you can well imagine. And we do have a report assessment and reporting system that collect information. I don't know how we can actually figure out exactly which farms on that list, huge list, that may have an interest in this kind of effort. But also I do know that we already have connection to schools through our 4-H programs. I mean, there are tons of different types of 4-H activities and programs that have been designed to connect with our schools, middle schools, high schools, so on. Additionally, there are some youth-based groups, I think, even beyond 4-H, that might be interested in this. FFA, for example, I'm not sure exactly how current they are or active they are, but I know they exist. As well as a Young Farmers Coalition. I don't know, I can't remember what the name of that group is, but it's easy to find in Vermont. Those are great groups that are affiliated with agriculture, production agriculture, and potentially looking to train the young people and have them move into careers or callings in the field of not just production agriculture, but value-added agriculture. So when we throw out a definition of agriculture in the state of Vermont, we like to include value-added businesses that are involved in value-added. So it's
Right.
agriculture, it's farms and agribusinesses.
Okay.
So it encompasses a whole massive group, because there's no way you cannot say that Vermont Creamery, for example, is not an agribusiness, because they take their products directly from farms. But anyways, I just wanted to say that I'm happy to connect you with the person in Extension who's responsible for collecting this information on our farms. We'll have to figure out how we can filter out farms that are not interested in this kind of effort and farms that are.
Yeah.
But also we do have already connections in our schools to 4-H.
Right.
And we should look then at the other agriculture, youth-based agriculture groups or young people-based agriculture groups that might have an interest in this.
Yeah. So I think that's helpful. And we can connect with them. When you're talking about the student thing, I just want to orient everyone around. That's like our June of 2024 milestone, is essentially like we're going to have both kind of. So in doing this, what we're trying to do is find all the places, not all, we're not gonna be perfect, where students are coming and they're interested in agriculture related things.
Yeah.
And then all the different employers that are interested in engaging with students in this way. And the reason is because we obviously want them to make connections now so that they ultimately end up, if they're interested in the agriculture field or value added, that they can either they have these connections, maybe they do an internship, maybe they do work-based learning, et cetera. So step one is kind of for us is like, let's start getting some of the employers who are interested. But that doesn't mean we can't already kind of simultaneously start step two. So on the flip side, what we're trying to do is also get a sense of, aside from work-based learning coordinators, aside from just within the school, because I think that will be a big piece in getting more folks into the fold that aren't typically already interested in 4-H or something like that, but also these other existing organizations. So, if you're sending us contacts for farms or contacts for individuals, feel free to also send us, some of these student organizations. There's no reason why we can't start like mapping that piece of it out as well. Because ultimately the goal is we're connecting as many times as possible throughout their, high school career, even elementary, middle school career, putting a face, putting a business, putting a thought about a career to some of these students. Like that's kind of the purpose of this the ultimate goal of this milestone, like what we're getting to is these consistent connections. Because it kind of what it will ultimately lead into is by January of 2025. So we're thinking, throughout next year is we're actually helping host some of these events where students can engage with farms, they can engage with, some of these different businesses and in a variety of ways. And so what we want to be able to do is kind of have where are the touch points for who these employers are and who some of the and who are some of these students are. How can we expand who some of these students are who might not even thinking about a job in agriculture, but they might be really interested in like Cabot Cheese, for example, and they might want to really work at Cabot Cheese, and that's what they want to do. So I think feel free as well to start to send us some of those folks, but that'll be a discussion point. That'll probably be like next meeting's discussion point is like, okay, now let's talk about some of these organizations that are on the student side that we can start tapping into.
Let me say this quickly. I know Kelly has her hand up, but the other, it's just a sharpening point of view. We have groups in 4-H, for example, that are involved in robotics, all right? That are, these young people are interested in what's emerging in agriculture, in precision agriculture, drone technology, for example, that we're using increasingly. That is related to agriculture, but it's not traditionally what you consider food or a value-added product. So there are also all these appendage type of approaches that I think are valuable as well. So if you're thinking, if that occurred to you and you're affiliated with any of these, then that would be also appropriate to contribute to.
I think the tech side of it is that's also very emerging and exciting for a lot of kids. I know First in Vermont did something similar with kind of like agriculture technology, which I think would be cool. Kelly?
Yeah, thank you. I just, in terms of trying to get the word out for registration, we could put something on the Farm to Plate website and in our monthly e-newsletter that goes out to a lot of different agricultural employers. And then there is another newsletter that we put out. It's called Small Bites. That's more industry based. So that may be an appropriate way to just advertise that we're working on this project. And I'm guessing it would be like an online registration. And then they would also select the type of employer that they are. If they're like I think what Roy was saying, like we're a value added employer, we're an organization that does food systems related work, or we're like a farm and the type of farm or whatever, just kind of separating it out so people can distinguish the type of agricultural related work that they're engaged in and perhaps looking for students that are doing work in that area. So just kind of having that as a secondary piece of information could be helpful when the whatever the final inventory is shared, to have that additional information would be great. So yeah, happy to share.
I think that's great. So I think that makes the next steps for Abby and I pretty clear here. What we'll do is take people's suggestions, information from folks, and start to make kind of like a running list. We'll just do an Excel for now of that. And we'll develop kind of like where this is going to live, like what the form, like if someone's going to actually be a part of it, what the form they're filling out is to be on it, or what information we're tracking and where it will live and how that will look. And we'll send that to folks via email, to you all via email. And if you take a look at it, you can just say, hey, you're really missing X. Like you're really missing this industry. You're really missing, you really need to know this information about a business. Like we'll just give you something kind of to start to look at, and then you can give us that feedback. So then when we'll get sign off on that, Abby and I can start making outreach to the organizations that we've talked about to start developing this list and kind of come to you with what the start of the list is, and give, obviously give you, Kelly, information to promote it, different folks to promote it, and come to you kind of like, okay, this is our start for the list here. Let's talk about the student engagement side at the next meeting. Is everyone good with that? Great. Let's move on to point 2, or the second milestone. So simultaneously, because it happens in January, we're developing kind of an employer toolkit. They'll be the focused on foreign labor. For discussion, we can leave that section out right now just because we'll wait for the contractor on that. But we want to be able to, with this toolkit, essentially, is that like let's say you're a farmer and you need help in hiring folks, foreign labor or otherwise. you need assistance with X, Y, and Z. As you all might know, sometimes navigating the workforce development piece of states' websites is very, very confusing, and a lot of it's very time intensive, and it's almost kind of like too much effort for what you're getting out of it, I think, for some folks. And so what this committee asked for essentially was like kind of like a toolkit for anyone who, you know, needs help hiring, kind of like choose your own adventure. If I need this, this is where I go. If I need this, this is where I go. If I need this, this is where I go, etc. And so we're going to develop that work. For today's conversation, ultimately what Abby and I are hoping to present to you all, either via email or at the next meeting, is kind of our framework of what the toolkit will look like what questions will be answered, and then we'll go through filling it in. So what we're discussing today, I guess, essentially is really what would be useful from an employer perspective, from a farm perspective, what would actually be useful information in that toolkit? Like, what are the questions that people are asking? Aside from the foreign labor question, because we'll kind of come back to that when we have a contractor. So I'll kind of open it up to just things people would want to know, things you'd want to see in there. Like, what are some of the sticking points people have? And it can be very, very basic. Allie?
I think starting off with the different visa types and what those visas are utilized for. You know, we oftentimes think of agriculture as just utilizing an H-2A visa, but as Roy mentioned, our value add is huge in the state of Vermont. And if, say, an orchard is baking pies, donuts, or doing hard cider, they utilize an H-2B worker. And H-2A, and then they have U.S. domestic. Some of them bring in J-1s. And then, you know, we also know that we have the refugee resettlement program. And I think it's helpful for an employer to know what their options are in recruiting workers. I don't believe an employer would jump first to hire and spend the kind of money they do on bringing in seasonal labor if they knew that there was an ability to hire, you know, refugees through the resettlement program. I think about a farm that's in Colchester, Essex, and they utilized refugees, you know, 10 years ago rather than the H-2A program. And we understand that before farms bring in immigrant labor, that they need to hire U.S. domestics, and obviously the refugee resettlement folks would fit underneath that as well. We can't bring in immigrant labor without hiring those that are already here. So I think just a map for them to understand the different type of visas that are available. And then beyond that is who is out there as contractors that may be able to help them through the process, whether it's an attorney or an agent. I know I've mentioned before that New York Department of Labor has a list of agents that their agricultural employers work with. And I think that's been handy. I know that many times I've mentioned to folks that list is available on their website. So something of that nature just to help them get started. If I had my wish come true, I think we should have somebody here in the state that really helps them navigate through that. But I understand there's not state funding for it. So they would need to hire an agent or attorney.
Honestly, that could be a recommendation that comes out of the contractor, to be like, that could be very well something that we end up putting some funding behind for the next fiscal year. Obviously, we're way ahead now of where that is. But I think in terms of the visa piece, I think that's great. And I think New York does a really good job at this. So we would like to kind of have like, this is who you contact, this is our contact information. Plus, these are the types of visas and how you could use them. So I think that's good. Moving out of the foreign labor realm, I guess, what are some of the questions, or like when someone's looking to hire, like, again, very basic, like what are some of the kind of top questions that they're asking? What do they need to know? Like where do we need to like provide the touch points for them? I guess to kind of put a,
I'll jump in here too.
go ahead.
If that's okay.
Yep.
You know, I think it would be nice if we had a list of publications that we know that are in the ag arena that people are reading and advertising positions. I know many times we've worked with employers who have and are looking actively for employees, but their job descriptions may not be, you know, up to par, don't look exciting, old, basic, written job descriptions. So I think that comes down to a technical service provider working with them on the recruitment part and making those job opportunities look appetizing.
Okay.
But just the publication piece is huge today. We've really transitioned out of, you know, the newspapers, and I think more is on social media, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And yeah, I think I've seen some pretty interesting job recruitment ads on social media that we have to capture that next generation. And unfortunately or fortunately, those are the platforms they use. They don't read a newspaper.
Right. Yeah. So yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. So the connection with kind of the like our business development folks who help with like the job postings, who help with getting the word out there, those specific connections I think would be useful. And I'm thinking like both labor and ACCD. Are there,
And
like,
one other thing, if I may, another point is in agriculture, we oftentimes don't state what we're offering for pay. And I think that's a disadvantage because, as we all know, agriculture usually works more than 40 hours a week. And even if the pay is at, you know, 20, 25 an hour, these individuals that are working 60 or 80 hours a week are making, you know, pretty good money. Especially, that's the reason why the opportunity is there for the seasonal H-2A program. Those workers that are coming up here, their housing is provided for them, transportation's provided, and they're getting paid the adverse effect wage rate. And they're also working well over 40 hours. And I think that if we're not willing to put the wage in there, we should at least tell what the hours are that are being offered, because it's usually an opportunity to make more money than a 40-hour work week.
yeah. So I'm wondering if it'd be helpful, I guess, then, and if we're doing kind of like a one-stop shop toolkit for folks, like having almost like a do's and don'ts list for job, like for, you know, posting your jobs, like post on social media. These are the platforms, or this is how you do it. Like, you know, you should post, like you said, Ali, like wage, hour, like what's offered, etc. We could even do like a sample job posting to kind of show like, you know, this is interesting and engaging and some of the best practices. Like we could do something like that as well. That's like, hey, farm from, you know, hey, Stratford Creamery, like this is the best, these are some of the best practices we have in terms of like bringing some of the farms into the 21st century, actually advertising jobs. If that sounds good, we can kind of like add that to our checklist. The other piece I'm curious about, if people think there's value in it as well, is like, you know, giving them kind of, as we're doing some of this inventory on the student side, but I'm thinking more like of the UVM extension realm, and if there's stuff at the Vermont State University or other places that are doing some of this education work with the people who might be looking for jobs in the nearer future, not just the children, like, is there, you know, some benefit in also doing like points of contact at those organizations as well, as like another place they can look to kind of promote jobs or look for workers, or is that not like something that could happen, I guess?
I think it definitely could. And Tori, just because you've been asking about the category of domestic and foreign workers, and it's very different, at least from my impression, the process for hiring and recruitment. So it's almost like I mean, they're both super relevant and important, but it's almost in a resource, it could be either two separate guides or two clearly defined separate tracks, because
I would have them be
yeah,
completely separate. Like,
okay.
Well, they would be maybe in one guide, but like there would be one page like, this is all just as the foreign labor section, and this is
Got
like,
it.
you know, hiring domestic labor.
Yeah, that makes
resources.
a lot of sense.
Yeah, it could get very confusing with them all together. other thoughts or questions here?
I just put in the chat, I think once people have hired someone, having resources available for how to best support those employees, so they're likely to stay, is also an important part of this as well. So programs like Migrant Ed or Bridges to Health that can support the healthcare and educational needs and social services types of needs of farm workers or agricultural employees is also really relevant to employers.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if it's like, is it too much for the scope here as like, even just some stuff that would be useful for any employer, like, you know, if you need to get your employees set up on Vermont Health Connect, I'm thinking like who their point of contact would be at like Wage and Hour, at Department of Labor, like, you know, are some of those business elements too relevant as well that we want to do like a page maybe just on like, you know, things you need to know about like who your point of contact is at all these different agencies and departments that like support and assist businesses generally, but obviously it's sometimes it's a little different when you're, you know, dealing with a farm.
You hit the nail on the head with that. They absolutely could use those contacts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think like there's so many different places they could go that it's like it's a little overwhelming.
Well, the other thing is too, and I've found this to be very helpful with the folks that we've shared it with. But another benefit that we oftentimes don't talk about, and in government we don't make recommendations, but we've seen many times AFLAC, which is available for the employees at their cost, even if the employer doesn't match it. If the employer enrolls in the program, it doesn't cost the employer anything with their time, but it's very helpful and beneficial to the employees that have chosen to be in those programs. And I'm not certain that that's, shared by anybody at our level.
Right.
But I think it's worthwhile to at least share contact information or, the offerings of what they have, because there's
Yeah, some of the different options.
Right, because on Health Connect, yeah, you get your health care, but there's things on AFLAC like dental coverage or, short-term, long-term disabilities, some of those other coverages that you don't get elsewhere, and they're at no expense to the employer.
Right. And then also thinking too, like, maybe it's on the maybe something that like we can on the employee side as well, because I think that's also part of what we'll end up doing. But like once the paid family medical leave is launched and they're able to buy into that for $5 a week, like making sure they know how to do that and those types of things, or like the businesses next summer farms will be able to buy into that if they wanted to provide that. Obviously it's a little different because your labor on the farm requires you to be there, but that's just the type of thing I'm thinking about, that like you wouldn't, it's not necessary, it's not specific to agriculture, but it might be useful for folks when they're making decision to work in agriculture adjacent, etc.
I want to correct my statement that it's at no expense to the employer. You're correct. They do have to at least take out the deductions on their paycheck correctly, and some are pre-tax and some are after tax.
Yeah.
So there is that component.
Okay, I think that gives us a pretty good start. What we will do in terms of next steps here is formulate kind of like the outline of what this will look like. We won't actually go about answering any of the questions yet, but kind of like what the headers will be for everything and how it will be organized. And we can send that around to folks, and what we can discuss, I guess, at the next meeting or before. You can obviously send things to us via email, is similar to the original ask, is like, what are we missing here? Are there questions that need to be asked? And feel free with this to circulate it to either folks that are in the business, other farms, other folks, and they're like, hey, when I'm hiring someone, because it's always like with different businesses, there's always like that thing you never thought of. They're like, I really struggle with dealing with this specific thing with unemployment or something like that. And just so that we can kind of put those questions in there, because how I'm envisioning is in a digital and a print format for folks who need the print format, they're able to say, I have this question, here's the answer. Not, it's almost like just like here's a list of the 8. I don't want to just give them, be like, this is the Department of Labor's general phone number. I want it to be like, you need help publishing and promoting your business. This is the specific maybe not the contact, but the specific office and the number or the email for this, what, like, who does this? You know, do you want to provide health insurance? This is, you know, the specific division at Health Access. This is where you get this information. Like, that's kind of the way we're envisioning it. So if folks are good with that, Abby and I can start to kind of develop like a overview of what this could look like, and you all can help us fill in the gaps. And again, feel free to share it with individuals that you think might have some expertise in this hiring area that could say, you're really missing like this whole section, or this looks great, this would be really helpful for me. This section is completely useless to me, I don't need this, those types of things. Sound good? Great.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So I do not have anything else on my agenda for today. What I think we can do, following up on this meeting now, is recirculate the one pager just so everyone's reoriented with the goals, and what the next steps are. And then we'll obviously follow up with you all once we kind of get started on the work. Great. Other thoughts, feedback?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Roy, you look like you want to say something. You're muted.
I don't know if I want to say something. I don't know if we have to give more thought to just improvement on the Workforce Development Board website. I know you're focused right now on some other things, but and I don't even know how, particularly younger people these days, I don't know how much they're looking at websites. I just don't know. But that was just my thought as we were discussing this, because I always go to the website to kind of see what's happening there, and since I think it provides such potential value. Just that was my thought. And you probably opened a little bit of a can of worms here.
No, what do you mean in terms of improvement? Just like making it look better, or you can be
some
honest.
Of this information, at least getting some of this information in there, having, you know, the frequently asked questions type of thing, so that it's very friendly to an employer.
Yes, that's the goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is for it to live there, so that like if we're sending someone somewhere, any employer, we're like, go to the Vermont Workforce Development Board website. Here's where this is. Everything links to where it needs to go. That's the goal. I was gonna say our appearance of the website is very ugly right now because we're in the process of like, they're doing it on the back end, and so it's not up to full speed. But yes, that's the intention, is like as we're developing these things, like it's all in one place so that people aren't having to navigate the entirety of state government throughout like the website. So yes, definitely on the list.
That was all.
But if you do look at our website right now, we're in the process of making it look better. It's the bane of Abby's existence. That's why she's smiling like that. Great. All right, well, with nothing else, then we can adjourn for today. I appreciate all your time, and we'll be in touch with next steps. Thank you all.